Hi guys, welcome back to our second unit of geography work on our YouTube channel. This unit is all about weather and climate in the UK. Today's lesson, as you can see here, is all about the factors which affect our climate. So we're going to write that down, as we always have done, as our title, and we're going to look down here and see that this work is due in on the 11th of June. Please hand it in via Teams as it's easier, or you can email your teacher. So let's have a look at our key terms for today's lesson. So can you write these down as we go through them? First of all, obvious one is weather. Now lots of people get this confused with climate, so we need to make sure we understand this. So weather is just your day-to-day conditions of the atmosphere, which change very quickly. So looking out of your window now, you can see what it looks like. It might be a bit drizzly, it might be quite sunny, and then you look out again in a few hours, it might have changed. And that's the weather. Climate is the average weather conditions over long periods of time. So you need to be living in an area that has the same sort of weather every day for at least 30 years to be classed as climate. So for example, somewhere in the desert, it's pretty much dry all the time and it's quite warm. So that's what it's like for a very long time. So therefore you'd describe that as the climate. But then thinking in deserts, it still can rain every now and again. So that is the weather. So the climate is the average weather conditions over a long period of time. Latitude. We remember this from year 7. So latitude relates to climate, where the higher the latitudes, the colder the climate. And then the lower the latitudes, nearer the equator, the hotter the climate. Altitude. This is basically as you go up, as the land increases in height. So as you go up, higher areas get more rainfall and are colder. So if you're up a mountain, you're going to experience a different climate to that if you're at the bottom. Okay, let's move on. All right, so let's have a look then at weather. Now, weather, as you remember, are the day-to-day changing of conditions in the atmosphere. So here is a map showing the weather conditions across the UK in one day in July. And this looks very familiar because we've all seen weather forecasts. As living in the UK, it's very important to us, the weather, as it changes for us so regularly. What I'd like you to do is describe the weather across the UK for the day shown. Now you can do this in the form of a weather report. So you can say what's it like up in Scotland all the way down to London. How has it changed as you go from north to south? Now let's have a look at some of these images on the weather map. Now the squares with the numbers in, the orange squares with the numbers in, show the temperature, and these are always shown in degrees Celsius. Sorry about my writing there, trying to do this on the computer. So that's shown in degrees Celsius. The little images there of the clouds, now they represent what sort of weather you're going to get. So here, the one I circled near Edinburgh, you can see that it's a bit cloudy with sunny spells. And the one where it's dark, you can see what that looks like, the dark cloud with a little rain on it. So you're going to have rain showers with some sunshine coming through as well. Okay, so there's my really bad drawing of a rain cloud with sun coming through. There we go. We just ignore that. Anyway, and then finally we've got these little circles. Now here it shows you the wind speed. So how strong the winds are, and also the little arrow there shows you what direction the wind has come in. So if you imagine the wind's coming from that direction, it's actually coming from the northwest. Okay, as you can see there. Okay, so depending on where the arrows are, it shows you how strong the wind is and where they've come from. All right, give it a go, pause the video, and then we'll look over it in a second. Here you have a map of the world, and this map shows the different climatic zones across the world. So if we have a look here, in the key, you can see the different colours represent the different types of climate found in these regions. Now, if you remember back when we did our biomes unit, this is what we looked at, and we looked at where the rainforests were. So if we have a look where the rainforests are, for example, the Amazon, the Congo and Southeast Asia, you can see as they're along the equator, most of them are either tropical wet or tropical moist, which refers to their location being tropical because they're on the equator, and wet or moist because of the rainfall that they receive. So one factor that affects climate is latitude. So going back to where the rainforests are located along the equator, we know that along the equator, the climate in these areas are tropical, humid and wet. So if we have a look here, places that are nearer the equator, or what we call low latitudes, tend to be warmer. So areas that are towards the equator around here are warmer. Areas that are of a higher latitude, so further away from the equator, they are colder. The reason for this is because of the sun's rays. So as you are nearer the equator, look at this first picture here, areas that are of lower latitude, they are closer to the equator. There, the sun's rays are more concentrated as the sun is directly above them. This means that the sun's energy is going to be more concentrated. So more sunlight and heat energy is going to get to this area. If we look at areas that are of a higher latitude, so further away from the sun's energy is coming in more at an angle. So it's less concentrated. Therefore, less heat energy will be getting to these areas, causing them to be cooler. Another factor is altitude. This means height of land, so going up in height. So we know when we look at mountains, or typical pictures of mountains, they have snow on them. And this is because the higher up you go, the colder it gets. There's a rule that every 100 meters you go up, the temperature goes down by 1 degree. Doesn't sound like much, but if you have a look, for example, Everest, by the time you get up to the top of Everest, the temperature is minus 72 degrees. And that is because Everest is over 8,800 meters high. For example, the closer you are to Earth, or to lower altitudes, the warmer it is. And this is because the air here is more dense, and that means it can hold in heat. But as you get higher up, air becomes less dense, it becomes thinner, and therefore it can't hold much heat, and it gets cold. Another factor you have is distance from the sea. So how far away are you from the coast? So here we go. We've got two areas here. We've got the coast and we've got inland. And you can see that they're different temperatures. The coast is 17 degrees and inland is 21. And this is taken on the same day in the summer. Now, what is the reason for those areas being different temperatures? Well, land and sea heat up at different rates. So the sea gets warmer a lot slower than the land does. And also the other way around, it also gets cooler a lot slower than the land does. So during the summer, you've got cooler sea, and the sun is shining down, yeah, and heating up the water. But because it takes a longer time than the land to heat up, when the wind blows over the ocean towards the land, it's going to pick up cold air. It's going to cool down because it's going over the cool sea. So as it blows to the area here just at the coast, it's going to bring in with it a cooler breeze and therefore cooler temperatures. But as that breeze blows over the land, which is a lot warmer because it warms up quicker, it's going to blow warmer air inland, and therefore you're going to get warmer temperatures inland. It's the same in winter. So in winter, the sea is going to be slightly warmer than the land because it takes a longer time for it to cool down. Land cools down very quickly. So again, the breeze blows over the warmer sea and is going to make coastal areas warmer. But as that breeze blows over the colder land, it's going to blow with it cooler air. And therefore, places inland during the winter are going to be cooler. Okay? So, if you don't understand, just rewind this little bit again and listen to my description. Another factor that influences our climate is wind direction. So here is a map of the UK, and around it you can see all the different types of wind that we get coming into our country. Now don't worry about this map too much because we will be looking at this in more detail in a next lesson. So I just want you to have a look here. Our main wind direction comes in here from the southwest. That is where our predominant wind comes from. So it's the most regular wind direction we get from the southwest. And we call this here tropical maritime air. Now, tropical, why? Well, because it comes basically from the tropics across the Atlantic Ocean all the way up to us, and it comes into the west of our country first. What does it bring with it? Well, it brings warm, moist air, and this means that our climate doesn't get really, really cold in the winter, and it doesn't get really, really hot in the summer, as a rule. We do have really cold times and we do have really hot times, but generally we get quite mild winters and mild summers and lots of rain throughout the year. So why do we get lots of rain then? Well, look, anything that is coming across the ocean or maritime will mean that the wind that is, or the air that is being blown across the ocean is going to then pick up moisture as it goes. So across the ocean it's going to pick up that moisture, and as it gets to land it's going to make it rain. It's going to release that moisture and rain. Any wind that is coming over land, so continental, as you can see here, means that it won't be picking up as much moisture across the land as it blows across land. So that means that if we get continental air, it's going to bring dry weather. And here it depends where it's coming from. So here we've got polar continental, which means that it's coming from the poles, the North Pole, so it's going to be cold. And then, so that means it's going to be cold in the winter and hot in the summer. And then tropical, again it's coming from the tropics but across land, which means it's going to bring with it hot, dry air, and that means we're going to have hot summers. So our wind directions do change throughout the year, and we get all of these different types of weather brought to us by the wind. But our main wind direction comes from the southwest across the Atlantic. Okay? The last factor that influences our climate are urban areas. So if you remember what an urban area is, that means towns and cities. Okay, so like in this bubble you can see there, lots of towns and cities, built up areas with lots of buildings and roads and sort of concrete material and brick. Now that material is really absorbent. It can absorb heat really, really well, and it can keep that heat within it for quite a long time. So when it's really hot and the sun is out and the sun has been shining all day, those surfaces, those buildings, that tarmac and the concrete absorb the heat and can keep the area warmer for a longer period of time. Whereas if you went out to the countryside, we don't get that surface material. So when the sun shines on these surfaces, it doesn't absorb the heat as much as it does on the concrete tarmac surfaces of the city. Therefore, cities, urban areas, are going to be hotter than rural countryside areas, even when they've had the same amount of sun for the same amount of time. Alright, so this is your extended writing activity. In front of you, can you look at the 4 factors that we've looked at already today? So we've got latitude, altitude, distance from sea, and then wind direction. I want you to explain the 4 factors that influence climate. So if you see in the boxes here, you've got points that you need to write about for each factor. You need to write, for example, for latitude, about the higher the latitude, the colder the weather, etc. And you need to also write about how heat energy is less concentrated at higher latitudes, etc. So what I'd like to do is write at least 4 really detailed paragraphs explaining each of these factors and how they influence climate. There is also a challenge here. I want you to have a look. It says explain why urban areas are normally 2 to 3 degrees warmer than rural areas. And then which of the 5 factors out of latitude, altitude, distance from the sea, wind direction and urban areas influences the climate of the UK the most? And then explain. Let's have a look at an example before you get started. So does this explanation meet the success criteria? So are all the key terms used and are they in the correct order? Let's have a look. The higher the latitude, the colder it will be. For example, the further north you go, this is because there is less heat energy as the sun is further away from northern areas. Does this meet the criteria? Well, the first part is correct. It does get colder the higher you go. But there are some missing words here. Right, it also says the sun is further away, and that is wrong. And also they haven't explained it further. Okay, so this does not contain all the key terms. The further away from the sun statement is false, so this does not meet the criteria. So here you go guys, have a look, give it a go, give yourself about half an hour for this and be really detailed. 4 excellent paragraphs and then have a go at the challenge.